Welcome to the What I Meant to Say podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Jones, founder of Be Better Media and a mom of four, passionate about human connection. Some of these stories contain sensitive content about real-life events, and all of the information in this podcast and from anywhere on the Be Better Media website is for informational purposes only. If you find that you need help, which we all do from time to time, please reach out to a licensed professional for help. This Thanksgiving week, I'm excited to release this conversation with this patriotic and creative actor, trainer, and former NFL star, Pete Koch. As an athlete who has taken care of himself throughout his career, he has a perspective on aging gracefully that you won't find anywhere else. But I am so excited today to have Pete Koch with me on What I Meant to Say, and the way our paths have crossed through mutual friends, and the conversation on sports and creativity and longevity, and the way that you have weaved all of those things through your life really caught my eye. So I thank you so much for being here with me today.
Well, thank you, Wendy. It's my pleasure to be here and talk to you.
Yeah, I love this. So you were in the NFL. You were drafted in 1984 by the Cincinnati Bengals, coming out of the University of Maryland. And I was excited to read about that, and also how your university quarterback Boomer Esiason was your teammate with the Bengals and drafted the same year.
Yes.
So that got me started.
Yeah.
That was my childhood, watching the NFL. Like, grew up as a 49ers fan. My dad was the Joe Montana guy. So like that was kind of my household. But you know, all those great games, that's kind of, I love the fall just because it brings that back to me. And I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, my little contribution to, playing the National Football League is something I'm very proud of. So I was a first-round draft pick out of the University of Maryland in 1984. And people go, wow, what kind of team did Maryland have? Who was at Maryland? It's not a sort of a marquee university football program, but everybody that follows the NFL knows Boomer Esiason. So he was the quarterback of the team, and I was the captain of that team, and we won the ACC championship. So for you college football fans, Maryland used to be in the Atlantic Coast Conference back then. They've changed conferences about a decade ago. They moved to the Big Ten, but we had a good football team back then, and I was part of that. And just coincidentally, Boomer Esiason and I were both drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals, and we rented a house together our first season, just to made things simple. And right away, we had somebody that we knew on the team, but you get to know the guys fast, it's part of it. But that ended up for me I played just one season with the Bengals. It was not a good fit. Mm-hmm. So much of the time it's about, it matters far less where you get picked in the draft. And it seems so important. We build up the importance of being a high round draft pick, and certainly there are financial considerations to that. When I played in the early 80s, the money was just a tiny fraction of what it is now. But I do get it that where you're drafted, and also based on a position you play, is gonna determine how much money you're gonna make in that first contract. But the most important thing is that it's a place where you can thrive. And Cincinnati was not a good fit for me, and I was cut in training camp the second year after the Bengals could unsuccessfully tried to trade me, and but it was a blessing for me, because I was claimed as a free agent off the waiver wire by the Kansas City Chiefs, and that was a fresh lease on life. That was a good fit for me. The coaching staff, the facility, the guys, the teammates, everything was a far better fit for me, and it was mutually beneficial. I helped 2 years later, I was a starter, a starting defensive end. So I went from getting cut to being a starting defensive end in the National Football, which was my goal all along, and it went well. And then but your career develops, and some ebb and flow of how these things typically go, and injuries started to accumulate for me, and also the Chiefs as a team weren't playing very well, and my fourth season there, the ownership thought it best to fire the head coach and the general manager. They cleaned the slate. I was on injured reserve because I had 3 orthopedic surgeries in the span of 10 months. And but again, it was a low point in my life, in my career, but it turned out to be a blessing because I was signed as a free agent with the Los Angeles at that time Raiders.
Okay.
And so at that point in my career, Al Davis, the owner at the time, rest in peace, he says, "Hey, at this point in your career, Pete, you've done some good things. Well, fan of yours in the league, but you've had a bunch of injuries. Well, understand that. However, here's what I'm looking for. Can you do this for me? Can you be Howie Long's backup?" And I said, "I think I'm exactly the right guy to do that at this point in my career." And it was about contributing and seeing the greater good. And truth be told, I was beat down, from the injuries, and I just wanted to, find a place where I could contribute. And if that means coming off the bench, that was my role, and that's what I did, and that's where I finished my career.
Did you have any? Was it hard to convert that mindset from being a starter to like being that contributor coming off the bench?
It wasn't, because I think I had what I had going for me was by that point 6 years in the National Football League and understanding my place in the grand scheme of things, where I fit in, and it would be I knew I wasn't a star player. I was the guy that was looking around going, wow, look at the level of talent. When I saw Howie Long, when I was with the Kansas City Chiefs, we had some all-pro defensive ends there, Art Still and Mike Bell, and they were just so outstanding and great guys, and I learned a lot from them, but I saw that they were playing like just a half a step quicker, just a half a step more athletic than I was, and I didn't need any consoling, because I said to myself, how many people want to be where I am right now on an NFL roster, right? So that was my goal. So and any athlete and every single guy in the NFL is has a great internal drive, and anybody looking for motivation from the outside is not the right person to be playing at the highest level. It's got to come from inside. And for me, just to be able to get up in the morning, drive to practice, and compete, had the study time, lots of time for every hour that every minute that we're on the practice field. There's 3 minutes that we're studying film and looking at that marker board, and talking about how we're gonna match up against our next opponent. It's an incredibly cerebral game at the NFL level, but I put my arms around that, and so that was exciting to me. So I was, every single day that I went to work, I knew I was in rarefied company. Yeah. And I played 6 years. The average career length in the NFL is 3 years. And so, when it was all said and done, I was kind of beat up. I knew that was the end of the road for me, but I felt like I had done my best, given it my all.
God, there's so much in that, because I can hear the gratitude for the sport, right, and the position that you're in. I can hear the lesson of really being able to separate your ego from your contribution, and how. And I, as an athlete, and I think it's important for so many young athletes, that lesson, whatever stage we learn it at, that gosh, there's somebody that's better than me, and seeing what you can learn from those people. And oftentimes, it does come down to just raw athletic ability, right? I mean, with the highest levels, the talent is so incredible, and you can sit and be in awe of it. But to even be part of it, to compete at the level that you competed is.
It's great
it's
fun.
A place that most people never get, and that gratitude for the space that you were in, it's really cool to hear.
Yeah, no, there were several guys on that Raiders team. That was such a blessing for me to finish at the end of my career. If I had simply finished and things came to an end, in Kansas City, and for a minute it looked like that was the end for me, that would have been fine. But to finish with the Los Angeles Raiders, and because I still live in Los Angeles, and because the Raiders have really the strongest alumni program. It's a very, very proactive community. The Los Angeles Raiders are the only team in the National Football League, because think of it this way: you got 32 teams in the NFL. Some of these NFL teams are committed to staying in touch, emails and things with their former players, and others not at all. So I have, for example, I played for 3 teams. I don't have any contact with either the Cincinnati Bengals or the Kansas City Chiefs. And I spent most of my career, 4 years with the Chiefs, but they simply don't have an outreach program. Whereas the Raiders, everybody that's played for that organization, even if it's just for one game, right? But as they say, you wore the silver and black for one game, and you're part of our family, our alumni family, and they have a full-time staff of 4 people, and all they do is programs and outreach and newsletters and a fantastic alumni weekend. And if there's something that you need, or maybe you're coming into town, into Vegas to see a game, you can reach out to the alumni, and they're open to and very receptive. They know everybody by first name, and whether you're in the Hall of Fame or you just played 3 games for the Raiders, they treat everybody the same. And it's and that's because of the owner, Mark Davis. And so when I reflect on how fortunate I was to finish, and I'm not even talking about just the relationships that I've cultivated. I mean, my teammate, for the football fans that were fans of the NFL in the 80s, they'll remember these names like the great receiver Willie Gault, and he was my teammate with the Raiders, and he's a guy that I see at the gym, to this day. So these enduring friendships are really what make it all so special.
That is really cool, and I always follow because I grew up in Fresno, and Fresno State's produced quite a few good NFL quarterbacks. Indeed, Carr. So I've brothers. Yeah, both Carr brothers. We got Josh. Well, Josh Allen was he is a Wyoming, but out of Fresno. Okay. He farms next to our family, so I'm following the Eagles like crazy right now because he's doing such an amazing job. And Trent Dilfer came out of Fresno State. So I followed all of these, but I followed the Raiders since Carr's been there, because there really is tremendous leadership in that. And I grew up, like I said, a 49ers fan, so that was always a big rivalry, right? But sure. It's amazing, even from the outside, just the sense that sports produces this community of people that are always rooting for something greater. And that's what I love about sports. And then to hear people that have been through it on the inside and still have those relationships that come through when the leadership is so strong. And you realize the importance of really good leadership because it produces relationships that last forever,
Indeed. And with the Raiders organization, they've only known ownership just about since the beginning. I've read a couple of books on the history of the Raiders. It's so interesting, but Al Davis became. There was a limited partnership, which they don't allow partnerships. The NFL only wants one person to own a team. They don't want to deal with 5 people, right? Yeah. And but way back in their first year was 1960. There was a small group of owners, and Al Davis was not a part of that. He joined the organization, I believe, in the second season as an assistant coach, became the head coach, and at some point in the history, Al Davis actually negotiated as part of his compensation an ownership position within the team, a partial ownership. Over the years, he leveraged that into a majority ownership, which is unfathomable now to think that. Can you imagine the head coach of the Cowboys going to Jerry Jones and saying, I want to own 40% of the team or something? It'd be insane, right? Yeah. But that's how it was back then, and Al Davis was a sharp man, and so from beginning around the early 60s, he was the managing general partner, and he made all the decisions. He didn't have to defer to anybody. Over time, I'm not sure how that's all rectified itself, but that his ownership leadership, he eventually left coaching so that he could run the team as an owner / general manager, and they won 3 Super Bowls. And then eventually, and Al Davis and his wife had one child, and that's Mark Davis, who is the current owner of the team. And the reason I took a minute to explain that whole story is that, and of course, Al Davis died about 7 years ago, but Mark Davis is the driver. It was his idea. He put it together, and he spends his own money to make the Raiders alumni program it loses money. For them to support us, we don't generate any money for the organization, right? It's just
Right.
the games that do, and the players in the TV contracts principally. But he has said, and I heard him say, he said this in front of a group alumni weekend in front of 250 former players. He said, over the years, people have said to me, "Did you have any brothers and any siblings?" And he says, "No, I'm an only child." And they said, do you think you ever miss having a family of your own? And he said, "But you're my family, all of you." And it was 250 alumni. There was 12 Hall of Famers, Jim Otto, and Ted Hendricks, and all these Raider greats, and I mean, just about brought the place to tears.
Yeah.
And so here's an owner that over the years that owners have been criticized for treating their players poorly, and some do, and considering them something that they could write off at the end of the day. And so here's an owner of the Raiders saying that you, the former players, are my family, and that's why I put this
And there's that sense of care, which we all know coming out of football. Some of my life story has been traced through the football. Like, I've seen what can happen to players who come through the high college ranks and go into the NFL, and we know that we hear so many of the scary stories of traumatic brain injury and all of the things that NFL players are experiencing. So to have somebody, like, we do need that leadership behind players and when they finish, because gosh, there's a need out there. Have you seen it? Yes,
right. So but that's one of the great changes. So I'm 60 now, so I played all this talk is 35 years ago, and if sometimes people say to me, how different, like, how is the NFL? The NFL has changed in many different ways since I played, and the folks that I was in that played during that era of, some say, the golden era of quarterbacks, where Joe Montana and John Elway and Dan Marino and Jim Kelly were on top, and they really changed the game. They sort of took the passing game all the way and brought it to the forefront, which the players now do sort of automatically. But one of the things that's changed dramatically in the game is the rules that have changed to protect the players from the head contacts, which we know now, didn't know then, but know now can lead to all kinds of neurological problems. And that's going to continue to be in the news, and that's sort of never going to stop as long as you have people running into each other, frankly, and I don't, sort of mixed feelings about youth football and where all that, but the studying the effects of all this stuff is a work in progress, something I pay attention to a little bit, and but I played any player that played before around 96. Which is where they really started to change the rules, not only in terms of the head-to-head, the helmet-to-helmet contacts in the game, and sort of outlawing that type of tackling, and that was these are all positive changes, and also the way guys practice, because there's so many head contacts in practice. So and there's ways to reduce. In fact, you can eliminate the head contacts. All you have to do is go out there and tell the guys to put their pads on, come out to practice, but leave your helmet in the locker room. That would change everything. Guys would not hit each other in the head. And so there's more and more time dedicated to practicing, whether or not they're wearing shoulder pads, but without a helmet, which is de facto going to remove any incidents of head contacts.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you can see, and that's interesting when you say 1996. That's when I graduated from college. And so that is very interesting to know, like, the people that I've known. I'm still friends with lots of football players. And that's
around.
And you don't know till about 40.
Oh.
Like, what's really kicking in.
Yeah. Oh, there's
again. And then there are some examples of younger, but it seems like there's an age where things start to and you're sitting here at 60, and you've clearly, I mean, you've lived this life, and you've taken such good care of yourself that it's impressive. Like the longevity factor and the longevity for a football player is something like my kids, they turn into volleyball players or other things, and nobody's ever played football.
Yeah.
And I love football, and then yet I'm like, there's a part of me that's really happy that, I don't want to see my kid on the bottom of the pile anymore. So,
right.
But there are such life lessons that get taught from the discipline and the grit and the toughness, and, it's never all one thing or the other, right? There's like accepted risks, and at least when we know what we're dealing with, and we can, be more cognizant of what's going on, right? And do those practices and things that we can do to mitigate the risk factors.
Contact football is not going to go away.
Yeah.
At the youth level, the numbers are way down.
Yeah.
Way down. So, and I understandably, and then a lot of the contact youth football has been replaced by flag football, and there's that. I think that trend will continue, and I'm not sure it's a bad thing. It might be just actually kind of the appropriate thing to do, because I don't think we have enough. I don't think the neuroscientists and there's a lot of folks studying this, and big budgets from the NFL to study the effects of the head contacts on youth athletes, and they're even studying girls. I think they've eliminated headers in youth soccer.
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing. It's like you're not going to concussions across the board. I talk to volleyball and soccer players all the time, females that have just as many head traumas as some of the guys I've talked to. I don't think it discriminates across sports, and I know we focus on football a lot, but it's like the knowledge of what concussions does that we didn't have in my generation or yours. It's different, and it goes for every sport, But I know I kind of want to go back to where you were. So when you came to work at the Raiders, and so you're here in LA, is that when you also started to break into the acting field?
Yeah, that might be a logical conclusion, but there's a little more backstory. I'm from New York, Long Island, right, representing, and when I was in high school, we had a very poor weightlifting gym at the high school I went to, and I was real skinny, and I knew I wanted to develop my body and I knew even in the late 70s that to optimize my ability to be a good football player, and I really wanted to play in a big college program, that I need to be stronger, because at that time I was when I first joined this gym called Rab's Gym in Lynbrook, Long Island, I was about 6'4" and about 175 pounds, and I needed to be over 200 pounds for sure. And I'm a lineman, right? I'm a defensive lineman. And I joined this gym, and there was a bunch of older guys, like bodybuilder type guys, and I met a guy named Perry Rosen, who was about 9 years older than me. Became like a not a friend and like a big brother. And he, once we got to know each other, I said, "What do you do? What do you do?" He goes, "Oh man, I own this small business, but really I'm an actor." And because where we lived, you could drive into Manhattan in 20 minutes, and that's where he went for his auditions. Okay. And his acting class, and he was doing a off-Broadway play, and I had these things going on. I'm really an actor, and everything else is just to, provide me with enough income to move from here to here as I become an actor. Uh-huh. And I was like, wow, he's like the first actor I ever met. He was a professional actor, And so fast forward, I go away to the University of Maryland for 4 seasons, and we stay in touch. This pre-cell phone, so we're like, I guess, letters or phone calls once in a while. And he even came to a couple of games at Maryland and supported me. It was in his friendship. And when I got drafted by the Bengals, I played my first season, and then takes about six between training camp and the end of the season is about 6.5 months. And the Bengals did not go to the playoffs, so I was like, what am I going to do? And I was in touch with him, and he, at that point in time, Perry had decided to go for it. And he goes, I want to be in the biggest pond as an actor, because he hadn't made it. He was stumbling along, doing the best he could, and he moved to L.A. And so he says, come on out and visit me. And I had only been to L.A. once as a kid and didn't really remember it much. And it just seemed like and I didn't know where, I was just trying to, all I needed to do was stay in shape in the off season. And I thought I could live anywhere because half the guys on the team lived all over the country. So I went to visit him, and he says, you ought to stay here. And I loved it. And he got a job as a personal trainer. And he took me to his gym, and I joined there, and he helped me find an agent. And he said, he's the guy that convinced me, you could do this too, and I help you do it. Look, here's audition sides, here's how it works. He took me to an audition so I could see what it was like. He was very supportive. Very rare that I wasn't an aspiring actor begging somebody to show me how to do it. I was like, what would I do if I moved out here? He goes, you be an actor like me.
That's such a cool place to be coming from, because you probably also, you realize, like, when you're desperate, things don't work out, right? Yeah. But if you're just kind of curious, right? Are you just curious? You're like, oh, well, I can do that. Yeah. Right? There's that sense of like, show me what can happen, instead of like, I gotta have this.
Right. He says, he just made the whole thing seem possible to me, and again, that's what great friends do. Yeah. And fast forward, he took me to. He goes, look, I got to know. What are you doing this afternoon? I go, well, I got nothing really. And he goes, look, I got an audition, and you'd be actually perfect for it, and I want you to come with me. And I wasn't a member of the Screen Actors Guild or all this stuff that, like, he was a professional actor. And I go, for reals? He goes, yeah. And he goes, they need like a guy that's like a professional wrestler. Now my buddy Perry was 6'3", 220 pounds. He's a strong guy, big strong guy, but I'm 6'6", 280. And he goes, no, I think you're just gonna. And so we get in the car, we drive into Hollywood, and he told me how to dress, like leggings, and a tank top, and we walk into this room, and there's 70 guys that are my size or bigger, long hair, tattoos, oiled up, and Perry looked like the smallest guy, and he was right, like they were auditioning really, really big guys. And he walks up to the cast, and I'm like, this is wild. And he walks up to the casting director, who he knew, and he says, hey, this is my friend Pete. He looks perfect for this role, right? And she goes, yeah. She goes, here's the thing. He's not in the Screen Actors Guild. Could you, because that's a big deal. You can really, legally even, like, you can't get an audition, not really, when the client only wants SAG professional actors. And she goes, wow, Pete, you look fantastic. All right, we'll just break the rule for today. Go ahead and sign your name in right there. I booked the job. I got the national commercial for 4 trucks, and then that allowed me to get a SAG card. That's kind of how it works. You pay a nominal fee, and then you send that money in, and then you get your card, which says you're a member of the Screen Actors Guild. Some people come out here, work at it for a decade, and they never get a SAG card. They never get into the guild. And it just went my way. And then I started going to more and more. Then I got an agent, went to more and more commercial auditions. It all because I had a friend, Perry, that believed in me, that I could do something that I hadn't even thought about doing on my own. He just saw it in me and believed in me. And I listen, once I saw what he was doing and we would run scenes together, I was interested in it. And I did get interested, and I felt like it was something. But having somebody that believes in you is so powerful that and then the opposite of jealousy. He took me to an audition that he wanted the part for, knowing that I might be and he goes, you son of a gun, and he goes, you're buying me dinner. And totally. And so that was just that was kind of when I really, really knew that I had a chance, maybe to have some success as an actor. and also find sort of the joy in it. Yeah.
And then you're able, when you have someone that does that for you, you're also able to pay that forward. I'm sure.
Yes, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing that you say that. I'd love to pay forward, and I have met many young actors over the years, and my comment is, and sometimes actors, young actors, don't really understand the business. They think that they need to fit into a certain category. And I'm here to say that you just what you do, talent, you make your own category, in hard work and having having and showing casting people that you are talented, that you are committed, that you are prepared for that audition, and no matter what your look is. I mean, I don't know what Danny DeVito was thinking of 50 years ago when he came to Hollywood. Like, what category was he in? He's 4'8".
Yeah.
And I think he's one of the most absolutely brilliant actors of his generation.
Agreed.
I'm not lying. He has done so many great, and now he's got these commercials running, and they're absolutely fantastic. So I don't know what category he fit in. He made his own category, and he took it like all the way.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this chat as much as I am. For more great content, courses, and lifestyle, go to BeBetterMedia.tv. Yeah, that's such great advice. I'm going to point that out to some young actors in my life. My 17-year-old is she's going to be in Chicago this weekend at Redondo Theater Arts. And there, she went from sports to, Mom, I want to do this drama thing. And I was like, go for it, kid. And to watch her on stage, I'm amazed, because to me, that takes so much more courage than sports ever took. Like that, getting up and expressing yourself, singing, acting. But man, it's her sweet spot. I think it's interesting in this generation. I'm sure you've been told no a million times, right? Or there's the constructive criticism that we all learn makes us better, and of course you want to make sure it's coming from a good source, but we have to handle some of that stuff, and I think that's hard on that road of the creative pursuit, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting comment. I've thought about that quite a bit, because when of all the sports in the world, the team sports are always oriented towards team sports. But I played when I was young, I played basketball and baseball too. But of all the team sports, I picked the most physical, the most brutal one. So in a sense, no, it comes in the form often of getting knocked on your butt, right? In pain.
Yeah.
You like, as a defensive end, I'm trying to make the play, and if I get blocked and double teamed and pushed back, man, that's a no.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tackle that guy, and you're going no, and it's and there's some pain involved, and then you get to you get to auditioning, and there's no physical pain, but you go to audition after audition after, you don't, no news is bad news in Hollywood. Yeah. And you're trying to audition in such a way to get a positive response from the folks that are looking at your audition, the casting people and the director. And that's a different kind of a no that you get over and over, and you have to look, you've got to be, even the very best football players all of them, I played with Anthony Munoz and Howie Long and these guys in the Hall of Fame. They all got knocked on their ass from time to time, but they were, they had to show that same resiliency. I would say the great ones, need to be resilient less often, because they're dominating,
right,
more regularly than the other players. That's fine. And you know what? For years and years, I've been friends with an actor, Benicio del Toro. Mm-hmm. People might know him from movies like Traffic and Soldado and these things. Anyway, I asked him, and we've discussed how he got involved in acting, and when he was a teenager and began auditioning, He studied in college. He studied theater in college and studied in New York City, and he began auditioning. And he got a lot of yeses right away. He got a few no's and was disappointed, but he didn't let that slow him down at all. And he got a lot of yeses, and he goes, I have to say, in a short span of time, I was accumulating a real resume and getting better as an actor and meeting people that could change my life. And so he goes, look, it wasn't a perfect trajectory at all. However, I never felt that despondent.
Yeah.
I felt like he got so many positive messages that he was good. Keep it up. Go to the next level. Getting cast in a Bond movie when he was just 19 years old, wow. The youngest Bond villain, and these were all very, these were affirmations and he just kept on, like, kind of stayed on course. And I love that message,
yes.
And so I'm like, hey, there's all different, ways to do it. His, what can you say? Howie Long and his level of talent was just, you could see it on the practice field every day. It's not just on Sundays, it's every single day. And, and it's quite interesting in that, actors only perform sporadically, but when I see Howie Long dominating in practice, I'm telling you, he's working so hard. The level of commitment, he's just a very good example of a guy that's in the Hall of Fame, but earned it, and he practiced that hard every single day. And when all these years that I've known Benicio del Toro, and we've talked about the process that he goes through to prepare for a film, he only makes like a film like every 9 months. And he takes a minimum of 6 weeks to prepare, 6 weeks of 8 hours a day, give or take, in his preparation before the first day he steps onto the set. And most people are like, what in the world? What can he be doing for 8 hours? All that amount of time. And it's an attention to detail. It's reading books and novels or doing the research. Or talking with the folks that are going to be doing his hair and makeup and wardrobe, and it's the level of detail that I've learned about what goes into, but before the first day that he even steps in front of the camera. And now I said, wow, that's why you have an Academy Award and a Golden Globe and all the trophies and all the awards.
No, it doesn't just happen, right?
Preparation.
Yep. And that I love this wisdom, because it's the kind of stuff I talk to my kids about when I'm just like working on a book report, and I'm like, now practice that thing 10 times in the mirror, okay, 100 times in the mirror. It's not due till Wednesday. Go ahead, keep talking, keep reading that over and over again. You're not going to feel comfortable the first time you read it, right? But it's the same stuff, and it translates to the highest levels. And when you hear it from people who have been there, like, that's what I love about these stories, is like, getting it out there, because so many of these lessons are not in what we're hearing in mainstream media today.
Right.
And so part of what we're doing here at Be Better is trying to spread this wisdom in a way that's like comes through people's stories, because we're all out there with the lived experience, right? And being able to catalog this wisdom is like one of the coolest things to me. I get so excited about it. But for people who don't know, you were in Heartbreak Ridge with one of my absolute favorite legends, Clint Eastwood.
Oh, Clint Eastwood,
So can we talk a little bit about what it was like to work with him?
Yeah, at this point I've amassed more than 100 roles in film and television and commercials.
Yep.
And by and large, I've had a great time doing it, and it's been a process. However, there's certain moments, like it's like anything else in life, but was really very special when I was actually playing for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I had an agent in the off season, right? So I was going from Kansas City for years and to LA in the off season, and still hanging out with my friend Perry at that time, and we're both working towards advancing our acting careers. And my agent said, you have an audition tomorrow, and they're not giving many details on this. So for some reason, they're not saying what the name of the film is, or even who's in it. But you're gonna go over to. It's a pretty cool audition because you're gonna be driving over to the Warner Brothers lot, and you're actually gonna audition. In a casting office, which is kind of a big deal, because at that point I'd just been reading for one-liners, and in just smaller casting offices, nothing fancy, nothing on the studio lots. It's a very exciting thing if you've never been on, but there's 6 studio lots, and it's Paramount and Fox and they're very exciting places, really, they truly are, and not just anybody can get on there. You gotta have a special pass. So I had some lines to learn. He says, learn these lines and go over. And I'd never been in a film before. I'd been doing commercials, and I had some one-liners. Drive over there, and the script, it says here, the description of this character I'm reading for is 6'7", 280 pounds, and I'm like, wow, I'm 6'6", like 275, pretty close. Yeah. And I'm like, how many guys in Hollywood are my size? In 20s, right? I mean, 20-something years old. I'm like 23 years old. So I drive over there, and then I find the casting office, and I open up the door, and there's 60 guys that look just like me. I recognized some professional wrestlers. Some had long hair, short. Some guys they didn't look just like me. It was every configuration of a gigantic guy. Some guys were, 5'11", 400 pounds. A couple of some guys 7 feet tall, and all these big guys. They're sitting there, with their lines, their sides, and I'm like, well, looky here. So I went, and finally it was my chance. I get in the room, and I say the words, as best I had prepared to do it. And I walk out, and the room had continued to be filling with the biggest men I've ever seen. I walk outside, I head back to my car, and there's like a stream of giants like walking. I'm like, what? And they're auditioning who knew there were this many big guys in town? They auditioned guys all over from New York also. And but my agent a week later says, hey, guess what? You got a call back on this thing now. This is really good news. So you're a finalist for this. So I go back to the same place at the appointed time, and I went, and now there's about 8 or 10 of us, all large, all different sizes again, and we're sitting there. And this time, the first time they didn't have a camera. It was just reading for the casting people, and we still didn't know who the movie was about. It was just this large character does blah blah, and he says these words, and then this time they said, we're going to record this, and we're going to send it to the director, and he's going to make the final decision. Okay. And I did my audition and went home, and then 2 days later, my agent calls me. He goes, you got that? Listen, you sitting down. Because not only did you get the role, but now I know they've told us that this is a Clint Eastwood movie, and it's called Heartbreak Ridge. And I went, what? Get out of here. He goes, yeah, they need you to work for 5 weeks on this movie. And there's one little problem is that the 5 weeks was actually 6 weeks. And that 6th week, now I had already told him, so I was booked out. I told him when I needed to leave town to get back to training camp.
Yeah.
And you cannot miss that, not a day. And I go, look, I got a hard out on this day. And he goes, I was just looking at your schedule. You can't work in the 6th week. And I said, is that going to cost me the part? He goes, I don't know. But let me call over there and figure this out. And at the end of the day, they figured that out. And I said, that's, we'll just adjust the schedule for that because we don't want to lose Pete. And one other story I like to tell about that, and by the way, the being in that movie, which runs all the time, Heartbreak Ridge, starring Clint Eastwood, and I've just got this a minor role, but I think an important role, and I play this character named Swede, and what that movie did, I never could have anticipated. I mean, if I ever ran into Clint Eastwood again, here's what I would ask him: did you ever think when we all made Heartbreak Ridge in 1986 it would be so popular still today, and it has an incredible following within the military communities, in particular the Marine Corps, because it's about a bunch of Marines. And I don't think that he could have anticipated it, but I think everybody involved with that film is pleasantly surprised by it. And so over the years, especially because we're all easier to get a hold of, through social media, and I've got a following within the military community, Marines in particular, and I've had, I'm not exaggerating, thousands of people reach out to me through some form of social media, or they just go find petekoch.com and send me a note. And they say, I joined the military because of you. In other words, they went to see Heartbreak Ridge as a kid or saw it on TV, and they go, wow, look at this guy. You could develop your body. My character goes through an arc, from a jerk to kind of getting the message and actually embracing what he's doing. And thousands of people have said, and I almost feel like it's a responsibility somehow, which it isn't, that because of a character that I played in a movie that was seen by a lot of people because it stars Clint Eastwood, and it's a pretty good movie. And it has endured all these years, and it's been, it's just been, truth be told, its impact, in a sense, in my life, trumps anything. Even in the 6 years I was in the National Football League, and I've done all these other roles too. And people go, "Yeah, you're an actor, right? You're in that movie." Like they don't go, "You're in those movies." Like it's that movie, and I understand. Right. I understand why.
He's a legend, right? To walk that road and fall into that space when you just keep doing the next. Another thing I say is just do the next right thing, right? Like, okay, show up here, show up prepared, do your best, and look at the rooms it can actually put you in, right? And you never know when that's going to happen, but that sense of getting into your own flow and knowing yourself, and you see that what I love about Eastwood is that he's never been afraid to tell his story and his way. And I think it comes off so authentically in the stories he tells. And man, talk about longevity. I've always been so inspired by him. And actually, I hadn't really been in Eastwood. My first movie that I really noticed of his was Gran Torino when I was in my 20s, right? He had done so much before that, right? And then I was like, wait, now that's that cowboy, and then I started paying attention to the way he's told all of his stories, and I was like, he became just a real legend to me, personally, because I think he's got so much integrity in the way.
That's an interesting first movie to connect to Clint Eastwood, because that movie's and he directed it too, like he does most of of his movies, beginning when he was around 30. He began directing all of his films, including Heartbreak Ridge, and Gran Torino, in my judgment, is a very brave story to tell.
It is, and
I don't think too many people are up to the task, especially at his age, and it was age appropriate. I believe he waited on that script till he got older to do. He's done that a lot in his career. He waited. He waited, I think, 10 years to make Unforgiven, because when he first bought the script, he was too young, and he waited. The patience that he has to do these things, and I think he was patient to make Heartbreak Ridge. And I know a little bit of the backstory. That movie was written about a group of guys in the Army. And Clint and the producer of that film, Fritz Maines, went to the Pentagon with the script, sent it in advance to get the blessing of the Pentagon, the Army in particular, to make the film, and they were turned down, and they were surprised, but they didn't like the foul language, and they objected to. They thought it made they didn't like the way some of the soldiers were portrayed. Probably didn't like the way Swede came off in the film, especially the first scene, and so they took, like anybody who's, gonna really make something happen. You just don't, just crawl into a little ball when somebody says no.
Yeah.
And they went down the hall and they took it to the Marine Corps, and they went and they read it and they go, oh yeah, we'll get behind this. That's fine.
Okay.
So I mean, I think it's fair to say that the Heartbreak Ridge has been a tremendous recruiting tool.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds like maybe that didn't sound in the spirit of how I mean it, but it's been a positive representation,
mm-hmm.
ultimately a positive representation of the United States Marine Corps now for 35 years now as that movie's been running. And if I've gotten thousands of people telling me I joined the Marine Corps because of you, all those, if the movie had been made and we were all wearing Army uniforms, it would have been thousands of people saying, I joined the Army, Pete, because
mm-hmm.
of you.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big whiff, by the Army. But more importantly is the resiliency that Clint Eastwood and his producer had to find a solution. They knew they had a good script and they just needed to get the support, and they found the support,
yeah.
with the Marine Corps.
There's such a lesson in not saying, not taking the first no when you really believe in something, and when you get behind things that when you're in your spot and you're like, you just keep going, and those are the stories that end up getting out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I when you talking about those, like a patriotic story, like so often these days, you'll hear like, oh well, like, I mean, quite frankly, there's been this turn of like, well, that could be taken as, I heard someone say, like, propaganda, right? It's not, mm-hmm. There's a big difference between the way that, and this is, the America that I grew up in and want to see portrayed out there isn't perfect, but there are these stories, these resilient stories, and I think telling them in movies, it's not propaganda. It's actually, these stories are based in the human spirit, and like the creativity that comes out in them. If it does inspire people, that's what we're here to do, right? I mean, so we're in a I'll say dangerous spot in America where we don't think that the stories we tell matter, right?
Well, there's for those that haven't seen Heartbreak Ridge, there's life lessons, mm-hmm. that are disseminated by Gunny Highway, mm-hmm. and it's the Gunnery Sergeant Highway, and that's Clint Eastwood, and you just have to keep in mind that this kind of screwball band of soldiers that he inherits are in their early 20s and maybe late teens into early 20s, and that is the actual age of the young enlisted soldiers that we have in this country, and they I think increasingly I think they're challenged
yes.
in society.
Yeah.
So for a very long time, the United States military, in all of its branches, has been a place for young people who aren't sure what to do with their lives and need structure in their lives to optimize their own potential. The military's been a landing spot for them, and that creates a win-win situation, and young people need structure, discipline, need to get better so that they can get on with their lives, whether they're going to be lifers in the military or do something else. I know many people that were just served a minimum term in the military, 4 years, and then moved on, but they took the lessons and the structure and the discipline with them and excelled yes. thereafter.
Yeah.
And so it's an important. I'm not from a military family. My father actually fought in World War II.
Yeah,
if he were alive, he'd be 100 years old now. So, but I didn't. My father didn't talk about the military. It wasn't a conversation in my family. It wasn't until I became a cast, part of the cast of a movie that dealt with the military, Heartbreak, that I began to learn a lot, and I put my arms around it, and I leaned. I wanted to know. I was so interested. The guys, there was a bunch of guys. Whenever you saw us running around with weapons, there were 6 actors that were part of this group and that were professional actors. We had lines, and then it was another 6 guys that looked like they were part of our group, and they never said anything, and they were real Marines, and so they were cast to not only be sort of it's more than being an extra. They were professional. They played a professional role, and they were paid as full actors by the Screen Actors Guild for their participation in the movie. And when the cameras were off, they were our technical advisors.
Yes.
So we had this close all the time. Am I holding this thing right?
Right. It's what makes a great movie, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's that consultant that's actually been there that can teach the actor, this is how we actually do things.
Yeah.
So that the story is told in an accurate manner.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And I'm a curious person, and I ended up talking with bunches of these guys and saying, you're a recon Marine, and how old? You're 24 years old. Like, how did you get here? Like, where did because this is advanced training. You guys are AJ squared away. Man, they were. And I was very curious to know, and they all were so committed, dedicated. They were part of an elite group. 90% of the guys that want to move up to a recon Marine status that don't make it. And I'm like, yeah, you guys are the best of the best of what you do around here. And I'm like, what's your story? I found that fascinating. And they were like asking me about the NFL, and like, oh yeah, and I felt like we had the same, very similar career path.
See, that's the thing you're hitting on here, and we're our the way our conversation's gone, and it's completely based on where your life has gone. But what I keep running into, and I'm seeing it here in this exact conversation, is the resilience and high performance, and the way that it's connected for me I've seen it through sports, the military, first responders, and creativity. And on one hand, you would think none of those things have anything to do with each other, and yet every story almost that comes through here, it's all connected. Because there's so many character traits and lessons that we learn in those spaces. And then for anybody that wants to live, that aspires to greater things in their life, that sense of curiosity, that sense of discipline, that sense of expressing yourself and knowing yourself, it all comes out in those places where we're put under the most pressure, right? And I keep seeing it, and I had no idea when we started this that my desire for telling a patriotic story or helping people see the America that I see, or the sports stories that have always given me chills, it's all related. And I can see it, and then when people live that life and they go out and walk around and they influence the lives of others, that's the world that we want to be building. It's not this world where you focus on how you're different or worry about what someone else has done to you. How are you going to make your day better? And that's what I hear in your story, and I'm fascinated by it, because on so many levels it's helping so many other people, and yet you're just out living your life.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I'll take some credit for identifying that. I mean, if you don't grow up in a family that discusses a certain topic, you're just never gonna kind of get your arms around it. And with me, it was a big topic. I truthfully never gave a lot of thought to the role that active military, even though this country is by and large almost always active militarily in all over the world, but it's peacetime, right? We're not in a war, and all how important it is that we maintain this the folks that are in the, I've got friends Coast Guard, retired Coast Guard, as well as Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and if it's not for people that sign up to do that, whether they are going enlisted or they're going to go to college. I got a buddy, I need to call him this afternoon. He's a trauma surgeon, orthopedic trauma surgeon, and he made he signed a contract with the Marines that they sent him to medical school, and then he was a trauma surgeon and did his residency, unfortunately, putting soldiers back together in Afghanistan. And it's quite a way to do it. And but there are many different ways that patriotic Americans can serve our country through the armed forces. Again, everybody from that and at the other end of and it's not even another end of the spectrum, but when I was in high school, again, one of the few times I ever had a conversation about the military, there was a kid that was one class ahead of me in high school who was the biggest screwball, dopey kid. I mean, he was messed up. All you could do was feel sorry for him. He was such a mess. He was one of the tallest kids in the school, and he was the skinniest. He had terrible posture. He was bent over. He had never cut his hair. It just looked like and he was always doing something just literally dumb. And he disappeared, and I just thought, like, well, that guy's not going to college. Like, either the kids, like, you knew the kids were going to college, or the kids that weren't. Like, that guy, who knew? He shows up to the school a year later, and I'm like, what? He looked like $1 million. He joined the Marine Corps. He was standing tall. He had put on 20 pounds of muscle. His hair was obviously cut all the way down. He looked incredible. He was standing at attention, fielding questions. He was a star. I mean, I still have goosebumps when I think about it. And I didn't know him real well, but I knew him a little bit. And I knew I had to go over and say, hey, man, what's going on? He goes, man, I joined the Marine Corps. And I go, wow, you look sharp. And he goes, thank you, sir. Like, it was on, man. He was fully in. Yeah. And it was I don't know, I'd love to know where that guy is right now. But the change was done. No matter what happened from that point on, he had enough structure, discipline, and the look in his eye was hungry and focused. And I saw that. So that was and I hadn't thought about this story in a long time, but that was the first time I saw the power of how the military could so everybody from an enlisted dead-end guy, and I kind of painted a little bit of the full spectrum to a guy that's a trauma surgeon, serving his country. Yep. That's quite. I don't think there's any organization in the world that can help people optimize their themselves personally, like the military can. And I didn't come here to do commercial for the Marine Corps, but
I know, and you did.
I didn't serve. I just played a Marine in a movie.
Yeah,
so.
But I do see a huge correlation between, especially like the highest levels of sports and the discipline it takes to be in the military, and even a lot of those guys come out and become first responders. Yeah. And that level of pressure, being able to handle the pressure, having the confidence to know when to act, to know yourself, like I don't think that gets talked about enough out there, and that's something that's really bothering me with because that message that gets to the next generation really matters, and I don't feel like they're hearing it enough today. So I love this, hearing this from you, because I think it is important and it's real. So which, that gets me to, you're 60 years of experience, and we could probably go on like this forever, but I want to respect your time.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah, I know. I know. There's just so much wisdom, and there's so much to your story, so I really appreciate.
Thank you.
I appreciate you sharing it, and I know that, through your life, you've also been training people, and, I read a little bit about what you think about, you talk about health span, and some of the things that you've had to do through your being a hard charger and a high performer, and then the ways that also can break down your body, and that, it's a really fine line. So maybe if you'll indulge me, we can hit that topic before we close.
Yeah. So I was that skinny kid in high school, but had a passion for sports and football in particular. And one of my varsity coaches, who played Division I football himself, and he said, Pete, you got a chance to be really good. Play big college football, but you got to get stronger. You got to get in the weight room. And I guess I was 15 when I heard that, and I started reading the muscle magazines, and it's so much easier now. Kids can just pull up YouTube and find just all different ways you can glean instruction. But back then it was the muscle magazines, and I was that kid, and my dad had a little weight set in the basement where I started out, and just pumping those weights myself, reading how the bodybuilders do it. I knew I admired the bodybuilders, and they were really my only resource. So this is the mid 70s, and football players were strong, but they were just, I didn't know it then. I've learned a lot more about it now, but they weren't lifting weights that much in the NFL, in the college. They had just begun, because for a long time, prior to the 70s, coaches thought that lifting weights would make football players slower and tighter and more prone to injury. Of course, we know now it's quite the opposite, but that was the thinking back then. So the only men on the planet that had these really developed physiques was only a group of bodybuilders, and it was just a handful of magazines out there that featured their pictures of them and the stories. There was Flex magazine, Muscle magazine, and Iron Man. Okay. And I would read them all, and then I would execute those workouts, and I thought, well, it just seemed logical. I want a bodybuilder physique and a football player as an athlete, and I tried to, that was my goal, to kind of meld those together, and it did help me gain weight and improve, and I did get a scholarship to play football at D1, and then once I got there at the University of Maryland, the strength and conditioning coach, and I knew I still had a long way to go, because I only weighed 225 pounds then, and I set a goal that I wanted to gain about 10 pounds of muscle a year, which is very, very reasonable goal to do for a young male athlete, and I did do that. I gained 10, 12 pounds of muscle a year, but I worked so hard to do it, and we had a fantastic strength coach there at the university named Frank Costello, who I'm still in touch with these days, and I was curious. I was like, it would say they'd write the workouts on the marker board, say, all right, you're going to squats today, you're going to warm up, and then you're going to do, 4 sets of 8 repetitions, or whatever it was at 80% of your strength, whatever. And we all knew how to, we're all educated on how to execute the workouts. We worked out in groups of 4, and that was all part of the developing a camaraderie, in college, which was great. And we had a program and a bunch of football players that prided themselves on their strength at every position, regardless of what position. And I would always sit there and talk with the strength coach, and sometimes in his office, and say, how is it, because I know it works because you're proving it to me, but if you can squat more weight, you can jump higher. Like, how does that work? And he would say, oh, that's a good question. Well, you've got fast muscle fibers, and you got this blah. And I was like, wow, how do you learn this stuff? He goes, well, you got to study anatomy, and you get a degree in exercise. And I got, wow. So I started taking some classes like that. Fast forward, I was always geeked out and reading, and then when I finished playing football, I got my first certification as a personal trainer, and then I got another more advanced certification as a strength and conditioning coach. And I've been doing that my whole life. I had great mentors growing up, and then as I got older, and I wanted, instead of thinking in terms of optimizing athletic performance, I started thinking in terms of how can I use strength training in all of its forms, and cardiovascular training, all of it, stretching, mobility work, and to optimize the quality and length of my life as I moved through it. And I started thinking in these terms when I was in my 40s, and then I got to my 50s, and I really started to embrace it and research and find the books and the podcasters that were discussing these topics. And I like to think that I'm pretty much on the leading edge of that. And because I've got skin in the game. I'm 60, and by the way, it's not a path that just kind of goes throughout like this. I've had some orthopedic surgeries. I had them when I was younger. I've had 9, and I'm looking at another one now, and I share that stuff. It's not fun. I don't want these things. I had a hip replacement, which was a challenging recovery for me because it was a complication, because not everything goes perfectly, because surgeons are human beings, and things go sideways. So that's part of my story, and everybody needs to accept that there's an inherent risk anytime you have a procedure done. Yeah. And so I'm going to need in the near future I'm going to have a shoulder surgery, and it's made me take a step back and say, because I've posted more than 400 videos on social media, short 30-40 second videos, making you better 30 seconds at a time, where I can just maybe give a brief example of an exercise that might make you feel better. You know, it was Einstein who told us years ago, and he says, aspire not to be so much a man of wealth, but rather a man of value. And so I said, and I had all this information in my head about strength training, cardiovascular training, stretching, like how could I, and I'm a professional trainer and I like to help people, but how can I give back? And so I just looked at, I had my training partner hold, everyone's got a camera these days, and make a 30-second video of me demonstrating an exercise and maybe talking about it for a few moments. And I'd post that on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, of all places, where I have the biggest following. And so look, it's free. If you just pay attention to this, I'm not saying it's going to change your life, or it'll teach you how to lose 40 pounds of fat, but I'm saying it might just improve your station a little bit. You might just glean a little bit of something you didn't know before about the value of doing pull-ups, or the value of doing back step lunges versus always lunging forward. I'm a big fan of back lunges versus forward lunges for some reasons that they're probably safer on your joints, and they probably lead to a greater glute development, which is what most people are looking for. And so this type of advice, just disseminating that advice so I can add a little value, it's free. And if you're interested in it, follow me. But now I just to close the circle, and I've had a couple of surgeries, and I'm like saying, was it, why I'm in this position? And can I live without the surgeries? And so what are the consequences, the risk of the surgery versus what if I don't have the surgery and its impact on my fitness? And here's where I stand on it as I think about it now. One surgery I had 4 months ago, and I'm recovering from, and another surgery I'm looking at in the near future. And I think to myself, the workouts I can participate in lately for myself, my own level of fitness has been diminished quite a bit, heavily, and so how is that? What's the impact that's had on me, both physiologically and mentally? And it's been it's really degraded, the quality of my physique, the quality of my fitness. I don't know about the quality of my overall, global health yet. But I also noticed, but for sure, that mentally, if you're like me, if you're wired like me, where you're apt to sometimes feel like you're in a funk and experience some depression and anxiety, like that kind of just bubbling under the surface. And that's something like where I want to crawl up in a ball on the floor. I'm lucky I don't have that kind of depression, but just where you feel kind of bummed out and like and you feel less apt to go and be proactive in your day. And so I'm feeling more of that lately because of why? Because I'm unable to exercise as often and as vigorously as I'm used to at the last 40 years, right? So that's been removed from the table because of the hip surgery and because my shoulder's been a mess for several months. And I'm thought, why is that? And one of the things is when I do go to the gym, is I do something difficult. And doing something difficult and putting it in your day and committing to do it with enthusiasm and a smile on your face is helpful, but working out properly and hard enough to elicit a change to your physique and is hard work, and it's not in my day anymore, and I miss that.
Yeah, It's a huge thing to let go. I've been through an ankle surgery that was a 7-month recovery from February pretty much to now. I just started being able to, I haven't played volleyball again yet, but starting to jog in the sand again, get back to hot yoga, do the things that I love to do. So I completely understand what you're saying and the power of endorphins and the other neurochemicals that are involved in that, especially when they always say, if you never go away from it, it's part of our life, right? I mean, some people, it's like, oh, I've got to figure out how to get a workout in. For me, it's that's the first thing for a long time that I've wanted to do, the first thing I want to do in the day. And when that gets taken away, it really, that's where that mind, body, spirit connection that, everybody talks about. But if you really have felt it, you get out of alignment when you lose that. And it's a big thing, but there's a lot of cutting edge stuff out there. And so for you to be on the front end of that, and even with the aging process and knowing that, it's part of life, but how do we stay at our best, whatever that best is, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. So when fitness is really working for you and you're at your best, I can speak for myself, but really I've coached hundreds of people, and we're all at our very best when we found that balance of exercise. It's a little bit complicated, but there should be some resistance training should be the featured part of that, and it doesn't matter whether it comes in the form of body weight training or barbells or dumbbells or machines, or for that matter, you can Pilates. Many Pilates moves are resistance training, right? So they're all these, but you have to put your muscles under mechanical tension. That's the magic part. That's where you elicit these changes, and then some cardiovascular exercise is really squarely in the number 2 position. We need it on a regular basis, and for a number of reasons that are beyond the scope of this conversation. But once we so once we do that, and for all the morphological, the changes that it can elicit to the way you look, less fat, more muscle, more attractiveness, improve the quality of your movement, releases from a neurochemical standpoint. There's all these cascade of hormones that make us feel good in just number of reasons, hormones that and chemicals that will regulate and to an advantage our blood pressure, and the feel good chemicals that are in our brain. There's so many reasons we need to exercise on a regular basis. Our species is designed to do it, and once we get away from that, and I've gotten away from that, not by choice, but due to some I've had some. Nobody said life wasn't going to be without obstacles, and I was cruising along pretty good all through my 50s with no particular orthopedic injuries. So make no mistake, I'm not talking about, I don't have any metabolic health issues. Thankfully, I'm as healthy as could possibly be in that respect, but orthopedic stuff will stop you in your tracks too. And you say, well, I've tried physical therapy, maybe I can kick this thing down the road, or am I gonna, and truthfully, because I know I need surgery on this shoulder, I can't wait to get it over with.
I know that feeling.
Right, so I can get it rehabilitated, and then I can get on the other side, right, where I'm exercising again, and that's I know a lot of people struggle with that mindset, and it's I don't want to undermine, because I've been on all sides of some surgeries in my life. 9 orthopedic surgeries and counting have gone well, and others not so well, but what's the alternative? We all must make, and I'm not telling anybody what to do except consider. And I know people that have adopted this mentality, and it's very precarious to say, well, as I get older, if that shoulder isn't working so well, I'm just going to stop doing shoulder strengthening exercises. But after that, it's going to be the lower back, and then it's going to be, the ankle and the wrist, and next thing you know, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
So we've got to be very mindful of our position and have realistic expectations. And by the way, I'm not fixing this shoulder as a 60-year-old for a 60-year-old. I'm fixing it for the 80-year-old version of me. That's what I need to do this now. I don't want this mess on my hands any longer than it need be. And if a surgeon says I can fix it, great, because I need this thing until at least 85. I need 25 years. I'm asking, I need 25 years out of this. Now, I don't know, nobody's going to give me a guarantee, but that's what I want.
Yeah, no, I know. I asked my surgeon the same thing on my ankle. I'm like, give me a percentage. How much can you, like, what do you think you can get me? He's like, 85. And I'm like, all right, let's try it. But same thing. And it's that compensating pattern. So I hear you on all of that, because whatever you have in one spot, if your body awareness is there, like I knew, like my balance was this. I knew I was pushing weight over onto my left side because my right ankle wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. You know, I mean, you that body awareness gives you, it informs you to ask the right questions of the surgeon or the chiropractor or the PT or whoever you're seeing. And that is that agency that we have to take on ourselves. It's not really the doctor telling you. It's that you know to ask the right questions to get to the place where you can make that decision. Right?
Perfectly stated, which tees me up for this point. I like to really drive this point home with all the folks that I work with, or I don't work with. Right. That's why I do these 30 seconds at a time videos or talk to knowledgeable folks like yourself, and I say we all need to be our own best health practitioner, longevity, health span practitioner. If to sit there passively and expect your doctor to do it for you is a dramatic mistake. And I grew up in a household where my parents, frankly, put doctors on a pedestal like they were gods. And that's a big mistake. And it was a terrible lesson, truth be told. It was a terrible lesson to a kid growing up. And it wasn't until I got older and I started to really think carefully about the position of physicians, and by the way, all the people that we might count on in our lives to aid us in some way. And I'm like, I have it probably has led me to the point where I'm at in my life. I have it's a blessing, but it's also something I was very proactive about. I've got a pretty big circle of physician friends that I can pick up the phone, text them, and it's a two-way relationship. I've cultivated these relationships. I'm a good friend, a good patient, but a good friend. It's with a number of physicians that I can call on, and I like to think part of that is that they appreciate the fact that I'm kind of living up to my end of the bargain as a fitness professional, because every physician of any type, whether it's my friend Todd, who's a neurosurgeon, or my friend Rob, who's an internist, they all know that their friend, like that, all of their patients, they are going to be better patients if they're physically fit and in control of their body weight. With 80% of the adult population of the United States overweight, it's a horrible problem. And every single day, patients walk into doctors' offices, and they're probably a cross section of America. 80% of them are overweight, and right out of the gate, they've got a problem. Whether it's high blood pressure, no surprise, or it's, oh, you're going to need spine surgery. Well, you're an overweight. It just complicates the surgery. Yeah. So guys like me that are committed my lives to helping people to control their weight, to get more globally physically fit. I like to think about the whole picture. I know where I stand. I know that I can. And I think of it this way. I like to tell people that I don't want to overcomplicate the notion of physical fitness. I actually want to take all these incredible ideas that people have about how to get physically fit and turn them into something that's easily digestible and something me and you can just talk about and get you and move the needle, move you from point A to point B. And for most people, that is less fat, more strength, feel better.
Right.
Done.
And just take away that sense of overwhelm that anyone gets in that process when you have the knowledge and you can distill it down. I mean, that's what a great coach or a great trainer does, right? I mean, be able to really simplify it for their client.
I like the way you say that, but I like to say this too. And and there's a lot of coaches out there. For all you coaches, whether you're a fitness coach or a volleyball coach, or like me, I mean, I had so many coaches in my life because I was as an athlete for so long. But as a coach, if you hadn't thought about this, I think you need to put it front and center. Your job as a coach, and it doesn't matter what you're coaching, is to position your athlete or your client for success. Period. Hard stop. Position them for success.
I agree.
What is that?
I love it.
It's a big topic. It's
it
right.
is.
But that's your job. Get to work.
Yeah. Amen. I'll take that. Like, that is, I mean, God, we've covered so much great stuff. I'm almost overwhelmed.
Yeah,
it's so good. Like, this could be a two-parter.
You're gonna remember that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the thing that I love to ask everybody that comes on the podcast is, could you give me one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Yes, yeah, I would, and that would be, believe in yourself. It took me a long time to get around to that, and I think as a kid growing up, that was constantly battling anxiety and questioning himself. It was, and it wasn't just as a kid. I mean, I knew I was in a struggle emotionally when I was in the NFL, and it didn't. I don't think it impacted my play, but I know that it impacted how much pleasure I had in the experience of playing, and that includes 90% of the pleasure, in my judgment, of playing, being a professional athlete in a major sports league. 90% of it is not on not on the field with 80,000 people in the stands. It's during practice. It's in the meetings when you're having fun, and you've got this incredible work and lifestyle sort of balance, because guys the harder a job is to do, the more you have to be able to have fun while you do it, or else it becomes just a burden. And there's nothing harder than playing football. It's physically, mentally, emotionally, you're actually competing. Like I know full-grown men that have never punched anybody or feel very uncomfortable balling their fist up and punching a heavy bag. Very uncomfortable about it, and I get it. If you grew up in that kind of a situation, full-grown men, and that feel that way, now just imagine for a second that you're in a fight where you got 15 pounds of equipment on, a helmet, and you're in a fight. Here's football for the less initiated. Football is 6 seconds of violence punctuated by 30-second board meetings. That's it. So the average play in the NFL is 6 seconds long, from hut to the whistle blows at the end. On average, 6 seconds. And then you get roughly 30 seconds, and there's a clock that counts this to get back in the huddle, call a play, repeat that, and that'll be repeated about 140 times in the afternoon of a 3-hour football game. So it's violence punctuated by board meetings. Again, so a board meeting would be you get in a huddle, call a play, because it's a complex game, right? So everyone sort of knows on the offense at least where everyone's going. And so in practice, it's a lot of that. But even more so, these individual drills that are pass rushing drills and blocking drills and these things that are very, very physical. And so like we work so damn hard that you have to be able to really truly have some fun. And the guy in the NFL locker room, even in college locker rooms, guys really have a lot of fun. So when I reflect on that, and I had a lot of anxiety, I knew, and I could identify the guys in the locker room that were very loose, and they were just living in that moment, truly living in a moment. I'm much better. By the way, I am much better at it now, at this point in my life, than I was back then. I've come a long way, and it's through a concerted effort to do so that aside, don't feel sorry for me. The locker room, I still have fantastic memories of that. But you know, every single day we have an opportunity to be in that moment. And trust me, when you're feeling anxiety, you're not fully in the moment.
And that's a problem a lot of people are all experiencing that these days. I mean, with so much coming at us, there's a million different reasons, but we know hard stop anxiety is on the rise, right? And it's to hear somebody, I mean, I don't think people would expect you to say that way back when I was experiencing that, and to even have the realization to be able to look back and say that and have that be part of your story, and the ability to share it is really powerful, for one. So thank you. And I always say, like, one of my greatest quotes that's come through my writing is the greatest gift we can give to the next generation is our own self-awareness. And I truly believe that it's what powers me every single day, to ask the harder questions, to take the constructive criticism, to do things I'm scared of, and, you know, hopefully set that example for the people that come behind me. And part of what doing these conversations, like, I see that so much in what you're sharing, and I thank you for that. It's really powerful.
That's great. Yeah, so that is I really took that. Your initial question was, what would I tell my younger self?
Yeah.
Holy cow. I guess I'd say just, lighten up, but lighten up doesn't work, right? It's just an expression, but I needed, truth be told, I needed the tools to manage the anxiety. And again, that comes back to coaching, and it's to imagine to go back in a time machine, but I think what you're saying is that if identifying when somebody has anxiety, they're feeling anxious, as a coach, position them for success. So if you see that somebody in your charge is feeling anxious, what can you do about it? I don't want to necessarily open up that whole compartment right here, but I'm saying that's where leadership and coaching comes in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is. There's so many parallels. I always say parenting, coaching, teaching, that there so many parallels there, but we can take this conversation in so many different directions but I guess at this point, I thank you so much for your time, because I've taken, usually people talk for an hour, and there's been so much here that I just really, really enjoyed this. So thank you. And I want people to know where they can find you to connect. So
yeah, I'm easy to find. Pete Koch, Petekoch on social, Insta, LinkedIn. That's the best spot. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll get that all in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for this conversation. I hope there are more to come. And it's been really interesting.
Well, congratulations on your show. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much for listening to What I Meant to Say. If you enjoyed this conversation, you know what to do. Subscribe, rate, review. And for more great content, courses, and lifestyle, go to BeBetterMedia.tv.